ओम परतत्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्णसमाज्ञया यो धर्मस्थापनरतो वीरेशं तं नमाम्यहम्. We are studying Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga here, and we are in the third chapter called The Secret of Work. And the very definition of Karma Yoga which Swamiji has done is the knowledge of secret of work. So in this chapter, he is telling us what is Karma Yoga. The first two chapters we can take as preliminary, and the beginning of this chapter also. And now, up till now, we have read that the main thing is therefore be unattached. And in this respect also we have read that to attain this non-attachment is almost a life work. So we modify Karma Yoga is karma without attachment, which is not possible. Then what is Karma Yoga? Karma Yoga is karma goes on and we struggle for more and more non-attachment. That is Karma Yoga. When we attain non-attachment completely, then we are beyond Karma Yoga already. So this must be remembered always. Whether it is Bhagavad Gita or Swamiji's Karma Yoga will always be defined as karma without attachment. And this is the ideal state of Karma Yoga. Swami Vivekananda has said in another place, in Practical Vedanta, that ideal is always above the real. So we have to achieve that. It is not simply that we start working unattached. In the first chapter we have seen that our motives will be selfish in the beginning, and we have to persist in attempting to become more and more unattached. So up to this point we have come, that we have to struggle to be unattached. Now, he has given an example that work done for children, etc. Now we have to read this para. If working like slaves results in selfishness and attachment, working as masters of our own mind gives rise to the bliss of non-attachment. So, important point he has told, in the struggle for non-attachment, we have not to be slaves to our senses or even to our mind. That is the practice. Our practice is that we are slaves to our indriyas and our mind. That means we go as per the dictates of the mind and the senses. And in this respect, I have quoted once that we want freedom. What ordinarily people feel as freedom is freedom of the senses. They want their senses to be free and they pull us wherever they want. So we have no freedom there. We want freedom from the senses. We have to control our senses. How? That Swamiji is yet to tell, mind you. Swamiji is now defining Karma Yoga step by step. So he has defined Karma Yoga as karma done without attachment, and he has also told that to achieve this unattachment is a life's work. So the modified definition is Karma Yoga is karma done with the struggle for non-attachment. And in this struggle for non-attachment, Swamiji has told, essential factor is we have to control our senses and even our mind. In this respect, in the great Kathopanishad, the figure is given that our buddhi, intellect, is the charioteer. We means I consciousness, what is called soul. Please never translate the soul as Atmana. Soul is a Western concept and it is this I consciousness. So I consciousness wants to reach the reality. This is the figure given. Now this I consciousness is like the owner of the chariot and he is sitting in the chariot. The Sarathi, the driver, is Buddhi. That means if the intellect knows where to go, and how to direct the mind, then only it has a meaning. Otherwise, if the intellect is guided by the mind, then we go to ruination. So we should not be controlled by our mind, we should control our mind. Then indriyas. Mind has to hold the reins tight and control the indriyas. If the reins are left loose, the horses will take us wherever they want. So this so-called freedom is a slavery. Slavery to senses and mind. About this mind, Swamiji is going to take in the last but one chapter called freedom. But now we understand that in the mind so many desires arise. And falling a prey through the desires is not freedom, is not work like a master. Swamiji never means, though it is an oft-quoted sentence of Swamiji, work like a master, not like a slave. This is not master of a factory, master of a company, master of a nation or any such thing. Master of a house even, that is not meant. Master of our own senses and mind. So that is the, how to achieve that, Swamiji will tell now. So, Karma Yoga means struggling here to control our senses and to control our mind while karma goes on. That is the definition of Karma Yoga now. And now, Swamiji has told that if we achieve that, then we will give the bliss of unattachment. Important point, very important point. The more we are attached, today we feel we derive our joy from attachment. We do not derive joy. From our attachment, slavery, bondage, misery comes. But if you are free from attachment, attachment is based upon the feeling mine. If this feeling of mine, Swamiji will tell in later chapters, this is a tentacle, a network of thorns, and it catches not only some object but it catches us. So, this control of the senses, control of the mind, then we will get the rise to bliss of non-attachment. Bliss is different than pleasure, bliss is different than happiness. Pleasure is in the senses, happiness is in the mind, and bliss is our own real nature. So when we are absolutely unattached, we will get our own real nature, which is called bliss. Working as slaves results in selfishness and attachment. Working as masters of our own mind gives rise to the bliss of non-attachment and attachment. We often talk of right and justice. Now this is another topic, important topic. I think on one day I have told you, this is a poison introduced by the Western thought. My right, I want my right, I want my justice, and duties are different. In our country, in our all the ancient literature, even today, I have a right to do this duty. Right and duty were never separated. What is my right? To do this duty. So, contrasting with that, Swamiji is telling, we often talk of right and justice, but we find that in the world, right and justice are mere baby's talk. They have no meaning. What is the meaning behind it? There are two things which guide the conduct of man, might and mercy. You see, if you penetrate psychologically, this is what we see. We talk of right and justice, but what guides us is might or mercy. Might, selfishness. Mercy, unselfishness. The exercise of might is invariably the exercise of selfishness. Yes, some just put it. Invariably. All men and women try to make the most of whatever power or advantage they have, whether political, social, family, everywhere. Whatever advantage they have, they want to take use of that and master. Mercy is heaven itself. Heaven itself means bliss. To be good, we have all to be merciful. merciful, udarata, unselfishness, they will be all be almost equivalent terms. And to be good, we have all to be merciful. So in previous chapters he has told good and bad. To be good, we have to be merciful. That means broadness of the heart, unselfishness is goodness. Selfishness is badness. Contraction of the heart is badness. Even justice and might should stand on mercy. How to determine what is justice? What is the right? Stand on mercy. One great example I will quote here. Due to some folly, I am talking of Valmiki Ramayana, please. Due to some apparent mischief or whatever you call from Kaikeyi, Rama was banished to forest for 14 years. And Bharata was supposed to be the king. And Bharata refuses this totally. He says, I will go to forest and bring Rama with me. And that is a readable, immortal portion. Bharata and Rama quarreling with each other. What is the quarrel? Bharata is telling, you are the king. Rama is telling, you are the king. So, contrast with today's position, somehow I want power, somehow I want power. There they are quarreling, debating, quoting scripture after scripture. Bharata trying to prove that Rama, you are the king. And Rama is trying to prove you are the king. Finally, Rama had to accept. He says, okay, I accept, but I want to follow my rules. Father has told me, go to forest for 14 years, that I will not give up. Then that compromise like comes. Bharata says, you are the king, I will coronate you here and take your slippers and keep the slippers on the throne. I will be acting like an agent. So see, even justice and right should stand on mercy. That means unselfishness, both want to stand on their unselfishness. All thought of obtaining return for the work we do hinders our spiritual progress. So that is the fundamental point, that if you do something, if we want return, then spiritual progress is obstructed. Nay, in the end it brings misery. Selfishness in the end will bring misery. We do not have that sight to see what will happen in future. We see only a little time. That is what Swamiji has told. So in the end it brings misery. So we are reading Swamiji's Karma Yoga, mind you. Karma Yoga, nowhere Swamiji is telling, do work like this. There is another way. Yes. So, to obtain unselfishness, we have to control indriyas and mind. One way is what Swamiji up till now has disclosed, that is we can call it discrimination. That is what we can call knowledge. That is what we can anticipation of the future. But there is another way. And that is what we have seen from the beginning, from the perspective point of view. The practical way is, there is another way, in which this idea of mercy and selfless charity can be put into practice. You want to put this into practice. For practicing Karma Yoga, you have to become unselfish, and to put this unselfishness into practice, that is by looking upon work as worship, in case we believe in a personal God. So this is exactly what Gita has been telling us. If you believe that Nirguna Paramatma, if you believe non-impersonal God, then you have to use your discrimination. If you believe that the same impersonal is a person, the same Nirguna Brahma is the Srishti Sthiti Prayakarta, Swamiji has used this before, then the matter becomes easier, simpler, rather more practical. But Karma Yoga is a science open for both. Those who don't want to believe in a personal God have to use their own discrimination. But those who use this personal God, their path is, Swamiji says, here he only says another way. In case we believe in a personal God, we look upon work as worship. In the 18th chapter, this has been described, Shloka 46. If we know that we are born of God, so we are not different from God. If we know that all the capacities of work which we have are from God, and God is pervading the whole world, then whatever work we do becomes worship. That is the 46th shloka of the 18th chapter. Yata pravrittir bhutanam. Pravritti means two things. We are born from God. And pravritti means our working capacities and tendencies, working potential. That is from God. Yena sarvamidam tatam. That means He is all-pervading. Swakarmana tam abhyarcha. By our work we are worshipping Him. Siddhim vindati manava. Man goes to perfection. Perfection in work, and then he will go to the absolute perfection. So, this is the way. Swamiji is saying work is worship. Work becomes worship if we have this knowledge, if we have this devotion. If we have this devotion, devotional knowledge like you call it, that I am nothing but God's instrument, all my capacities to work are from God, and He is pervading everywhere. Here we give up all the fruits of our work unto the Lord. If God is impersonal, this idea does not function. But if God is personal, we give our fruits to Him. Some people ask how we give the fruits. The answer is, it is a mental input. You tell your mind that you do not want the fruit, let it go to God. And worshipping Him thus, we have no right to expect anything from men. Two sides. From God we are not asking the fruit, and least from men we are not asking anything. We are helping people with the thought that God is all pervading. We do not expect anything from people, and we do not want anything from God. Then what do we get? Some just told in a previous chapter, we get the highest. Unselfishness will give the highest. Highest is bliss. Highest is we get God Himself. Highest is we lose our individuality into God. We have no right to expect anything from mankind for the work we do. The Lord Himself, example, Lord Himself works incessantly and is ever without attachment. Why is without attachment? He knows that the world is unreal. He knows that He pervades the whole world. So there is no particularization in His life. That is called attachment. Just as water cannot wet the lotus leaf, so work cannot bind the unselfish man by giving rise to attachment to results. This is again a Gita shloka. Brahmani eva adhaya karmani sangam tekta kuratiya lipyate nasa papena padma patram ivambasa. Lotus grows in water. It appears water is touching to it. When you take out the leaf, every drop of water goes away and it is dry. That is the example given. Work we do, but we do itself is not there. And so, no work attaches to us. Brahmani adhaya karmani. When all our works we dedicate to God, He is doing, God is the doer, and the result also belongs to Him. I am not the doer, result does not belong to me. This is the bhakti idea of Karma Yoga. So work cannot bind the unselfish man by giving rise to attachment to results. The selfless and unattached man may live in the very heart of a... So outside circumstances are not at all into consideration. The selfless and one word has come which is important. Unselfish may contain some self. Selfless, when the I self is not there, my will not be there, attachment will not be there. So this is an important word, selfless. Unselfish is self, selfish, unselfish. But no self, no question of selfishness. The selfless and unattached man, selfless, so mine is not there. Unattached man may live in the very heart of a crowded and sinful city. Sinful city, this means people are engaged in their own aggrandizement of their own ego and selfishness. The man lives there. But if he has no I, he is not contaminated. He will not be touched by sin. So, all the principles of that secret of work Swamiji has already given. Now the question is example. And there Swamiji is telling, this idea of complete self-sacrifice is illustrated in the following story. Complete self-sacrifice. Chapter number 6, Swamiji has defined unattached work as complete self-abnegation. That means I itself should be not there. Then automatically non-attachment comes. So that he says now, idea of complete self-sacrifice is illustrated in the following story. After the battle of Kurukshetra, the 5 Pandava brothers performed a great sacrifice and made very large gifts to the poor. All people expressed amazement at the greatness and richness of the sacrifice and said that such a sacrifice the world had never seen before. But after the ceremony, there came a little mongoose. Half his body was golden and the other half was brown. And he began to roll on the floor of the sacrificial hall. You have seen the mongoose? It is of this color. He said to those around, "You are all liars. This is no sacrifice." "What?" they exclaimed. "You say this is no sacrifice? Do you not know how money and jewels were poured out to the poor and everyone became rich and happy? This was the most wonderful sacrifice any man ever performed." But the mongoose said, "There was once a little village, and in it there dwelt a poor Brahmin with his wife." I need not comment, but in all the old books, Brahmin is always painted as a poor Brahmin. He does not want money. There dwelt a poor Brahmin with his wife, his son, and his son's wife. Before we proceed, I will tell you a story which I read, a real story. On 31st December of some particular year, there was bombing on London. And a man with these very people, a man, his wife, his son and his wife, they were sitting at table, dinner, to eat their dinner. Now before dinner it is customary in the Christian countries to pray to God. So he is praying, "Lord, save me and my wife, my son and his wife, we four and no more. We four and no more." No, that is one idea, extreme. And the other idea is, not we but others, not we but others. And that mongoose is telling this story. They were very poor and lived on small gifts made to them for preaching and teaching. That is how the Brahmin earns. There came in that land a 3 years famine, and the poor Brahmin suffered more than ever. At last, when the family had starved for days, the father brought home one morning a little barley flour. which he had been fortunate enough to obtain. And he divided it into 4 parts, one for each member of his family, of the family. They prepared it for their meal, and just as they were about to eat, there was a knock at the door. The father opened it, and there stood a guest. Now in India, a guest is a sacred person, Atithi Devo Bhava. A guest is to be treated as God himself. Now fun is there, Atithi. It is not an invited guest, like this guest has come. Guest which has suddenly come to your house is called Atithi, without date. And that is God. Now in India, a guest is a sacred person. He is as a God for the time being and must be treated as such. So the poor Brahmin said, "Come in, sir, you are welcome." He set before the guest his own portion of the food, which the guest quickly ate and said, "Oh sir, you have killed me. I have been starving for 10 days, and this little bit has but increased my hunger." Then the wife said to her husband, "Give him my share." But the husband said, "No, not so." The wife, however, insisted, saying, "Here is a poor man, and it is our duty as householders to see that he is fed." Now in previous chapter we had seen the birds, now men. And it is my duty as a wife to give him my portion, duty everywhere. Seeing that you have no more to offer him, then she gave her share to the guest, which he ate, and said he was still burning with hunger. So the son said, "Take my portion also. It is the duty of a son to help his father to fulfill his obligations." The guest ate that, but remained still unsatisfied. So the son's wife gave him her portion also. That was sufficient. You see, the order of the giving also is important. Not that the man orders his son's wife to give. He gives. Wife follows. Son follows, then the son's wife follows. And the guest departed, blessing them. That night, those 4 people died of starvation. You will see what is the fun in that. This is physical death, but they attained immortality. A few granules of that flour had fallen on the floor. And when I rolled that mongoose, when I rolled my body on them, half of it became golden. As you see, that much portion. Since then I have been traveling all over the world, hoping to find another sacrifice like that. But nowhere have I found one. Nowhere else has the other half of my body been turned into gold. That is why I say this is no sacrifice. So total self-annihilation, total self-abnegation has resulted in the body half becoming gold. This idea of charity is going out of India. Not that it is there in other countries. Some of you will tell me in other countries it does not exist. In India it was there, and now it is made by Western influence or whatever. It is going out. Great men are becoming fewer and fewer, but they are there. When I was first learning English, see, from where the idea comes, I read an English storybook in which there was a story about a dutiful boy who had gone out to work and had given some of his money to his old mother. And this was praised in 3 or 4 pages. What was that? No Hindu boy can ever understand the moral of that story if he is a Hindu. Now I understand it when I hear the Western idea, every man for himself. And some men take everything for themselves, and fathers and mothers, where at that Grihasthas Kartavya, and fathers and mothers and wives and children go to the wall. That should never and nowhere be the ideal of the householder. Now you see what Karma Yoga means. even at the point of death, to help anyone without asking questions. Here one important point is telling, very important point. There are worldly wise people. Be cheated millions of times and never ask a question. That means what happens, we go out in the world and people have money or means. They pose as if they are beggars. They pose as if they are in need and you have to give them. You give them and later on you understand you are cheated. Swamiji says, be cheated a million times, but be unselfish. From worldly point of view, you are cheated. From spiritual point of view, you are gained. That is Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is not as easy it appears to be. We think Karma Yoga is the easiest path. Yes, if we are like this. Be cheated millions of times. Very important statement by Swamiji. We generally like to quote Swamiji. Let us quote this. And never ask a question. And never think of what you are doing. Please, those who are the book can underline this sentence if they like. Never want of your gifts. That is another thing. I have done this, I have done that. To the poor, gifts to the poor or expect their gratitude. That day we heard Shukranji's example. But rather be grateful to them for giving you the occasion of practicing charity to them. This Swamiji will be telling is another chapter, 5th chapter. Here he has introduced it. This is Karma Yoga, please. Thus, it is plain that to be an ideal householder in the he is extending the idea of the previous chapter, is a much more difficult task than to be an ideal sannyasin. The true life of work is indeed as hard as, if not harder than, the equally true life of renunciation. True life of renunciation, true life of unselfishness, he has compared. So we have come to the end of the 3rd chapter, the secret of work, and what we have learned from it, unselfishness through discrimination, control of the organs, control of the mind, not to be slaves to the mind and indriyas, but to be free of them. Or, if you believe in personal God, sacrifice everything to God, work and its result and everything, and you will reach the bliss. And this idea of self-abnegation in either way. Either you have to philosophically think that you are not existing, or you are servant of God or some such thing. Either way, you have to sacrifice, we have to sacrifice ourselves. Now, an important point Swamiji is taking in the next chapter, and that is again, I would say, 2nd chapter of the Gita. In the 2nd chapter of the Gita, the Karma Yoga we are taught is that do your duty. And let not likes and dislikes, pleasure and pain affect your doing the duty. So, the idea of duty is introduced. And so Swamiji has to take up that idea now. It is a part of Karma Yoga. What is duty? It is necessary in the study of Karma Yoga to know what duty is. In the study of Karma Yoga, it is a necessary factor to know what duty is, and that is why Swamiji is taking it up now. If I have to do something, I must first know that it is my duty. What prompts me? What prompts me? What prompts an ideal man? What prompts a good man is not what he will derive benefit from it, but what is his duty. I was telling him, he never bothers about the right. He has a right to do this duty. So he must understand what is my duty. I must first know that it is my duty, and then I can do it. The idea of duty again is different in different nations. Like morality, Swamiji has explained in the second chapter, same thing in the fourth chapter he brings about duty. Don't impose what you feel as duty on others. Don't imitate others' duty for yourself. Your duty is your duty, his duty is his duty. And this again is determined from country to country, from caste to caste, from brahmachari and all that. So, same thing applies. According to the situation you are in, according to the country in which you live, according to your social position, and according to your growth, duty is determined. Example he gives, extreme example. The Mohammedan says what is written in his book, the Quran, is his duty. This is one idea, to go by the scriptures and your own scriptures. The Hindu says what is in the Vedas is his duty. And the Christian says what is in the Bible is his duty. We find that there are varied ideas of duty, differing according to different states in life. States in life, brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyasi, different historical periods. So duty in the past was different, duty in the present is different. And different nations. So Desh Kal Patra, according to time, circumstances and the country, duty differs. The term duty, like every other universal abstract term, that means the idea is a sukshma idea, subtler idea, not practically found in the world, in the gross activity. So duty is a abstract term, is impossible clearly to define. We can only get an idea of it by knowing its practical operations and results. When certain things occur before us, we have all a natural or trained impulse to act in a certain manner towards them. When this impulse comes, the mind begins to think about the situation. Something has happened, we, according to our sanskaras, according to the training we have received, according to our inborn tendencies, feel I should do like this. That is the only abstraction of duty. Sometimes it thinks that it is good to act in a particular manner under the given conditions. At other times it thinks that it is wrong to act in the same manner even in the very same circumstances, in times. In war the duty will be different, in ordinary social life the different will be different. According to time, the idea of duty will change. The ordinary idea of duty everywhere is that every good man follows the dictates of his conscience. So actually, we quote Quran and Puran and all that, but according to our conscience, conscience is, if I do, this is duty, if I not, that is not duty. This is the guiding force actually. That is the ordinary idea of duty. Ordinary means general idea of duty. But was it that makes an act a duty? Example is giving, contrast. If a Christian finds a piece of beef before him, beef, cow's flesh, and does not eat it to save his own life or will not give it to save the life of another man, he is sure to find that he has not done his duty. But if a Hindu dares to eat that piece of beef or to give it to another Hindu, he is equally sure to feel that he has not done his duty because of his instincts, because of his training, because of his sanskara. The Hindu's training and education make him feel that way. In the last century, there were notorious bands of robbers in India called thugs. They thought it their duty to kill any man they could and take away his money. That was their duty. That was their training. You ask them, this is immoral, they say, that is what we are trained for. The larger the number of men they killed, the better they thought they were. Ordinarily, if a man goes out into the street and shoots down another man, he is apt to feel sorry for it, thinking that he has done wrong. But with the very same man, as a soldier in his regiment kills not one but 20, he is certain to feel glad and think that he has done his duty remarkably well. Therefore, we see that it is not the thing done that defines a duty. Thing done, objective definition is not there. To give an objective definition of duty is thus entirely impossible. Yet, there is duty from the subjective side. Beautiful definition. Any action that makes us go Godward is a good action and our duty. So, again, in the Gita we find one criteria to judge every action is this, whether it is taking us Godward or away from it. Vyavasayatmika buddhir eka iha kurunandana. Bahushakhai anantascha buddhayo avyavasayinam. Those who do not have this criteria, their criteria are infinite. They cannot understand what is the criteria. But if this is such a criteria which will define all our actions. Any action that makes us go Godward is a good action and it is our duty. Any action that makes us go downward is evil and is not our duty. So, a subjective definition, subjective means from your point of view the definition is given. From every individual's point of view the definition is given. Objectively you cannot say for all. From the subjective standpoint we may see that certain acts have a tendency to exalt and ennoble us, makes our mind higher, and ennoble means makes our mind broad. While certain other acts have a tendency to degrade and to brutalize us, like animals. But it is not possible to make out with certainty which acts have which kind of tendency in relation to all persons of all sorts and conditions. There is, however, only one idea of duty which has been universally accepted by all mankind of all ages and sects and countries, and that has been summed up in a Sanskrit aphorism thus. He is trying to find out the universal idea. Do not injure any being. Not injuring any being is virtue. Injuring any being is sin. You know the Sanskrit? Sarva Shastra Puraneshu. Those who want to write down, please take down. Sarva Shastra Puraneshu Vyasasya Vachanadvayam. Vyasasya Vachanadvayam. Paropakara Punyaya Papaya Parapidanam. Papaya Parapidanam. That is what Swamiji has quoted. Sarva Shastra Puraneshu. So Vyas says from all the Shastras and all the Puranas, from all the books I have derived this. And that Swamiji says is an universal idea. The Bhagavad Gita frequency, Swamiji is continuously following the Gita. The Bhagavad Gita frequently alludes to duties dependent upon birth and position in life. That is called the Varnashrama duty. Birth and position in life and in society largely determine the mental and moral attitude of individuals, towards the various activities of life. It is therefore our duty to do that work which will exalt and enable us in accordance with the ideals and activities of the society in which we are born. So, colored by the society in which we are born, Swamiji has made the idea of Varnashram broader, universal, so that any society we live in, from that point of view, our duty can be determined. But it must be particularly remembered that the same ideals and activities do not prevail in all societies and countries. Our ignorance of this is the main cause of much of the hatred of one nation towards another. We do not understand their duties and we say they are bad people. They will not understand ours, they will say they are bad people. An American thinks that whatever an American does in accordance with the custom of his country is the best thing to do, and that whoever does not follow his customs must be a very wicked man. A Hindu thinks that his customs are the only right ones and are the best in the world, and that whosoever does not obey them must be the most wicked man living. In our country, even we have found out some words, mlecha, etc. This is quite a natural mistake. Natural mistake, please remember. Natural because all people do it, but it is a mistake. It is mistake, but it is natural. Natural mistake which all of us are apt to make, but it is very harmful mistake. It is the cause of half the uncharitableness found in the world. Swamiji has given an example now. When I came to this country and was going through the Chicago Fair, a man from behind pulled at my turban. I looked back and saw that he was a very gentlemanly looking man, neatly dressed. I spoke to him, and when he found that I knew English, he became very much abashed. That means he is not an Englishman. Why he is putting such a dress? That much gone. On another occasion in the same fair, another man gave me a push. When I asked him the reason, he also was ashamed and stammered out an apology saying, "Why do you dress that way?" And there is a saying, in modern culture I would say, instead of saying Western culture, the tailor makes a man. The sympathies of these men were limited within the range of their own language and their own fashion of dress. Language and fashion of dress. Much of the oppression of powerful nations on weaker ones is caused by this prejudice. What we call the weaker nations, they think that they are useless, they are not behaving properly. That is what the Britishers thought in India. It dries up their fellow feeling for fellow men. That very man who asked me why I did not dress as he did and wanted to ill-treat me because of my dress may have been a very good man, a good father and a good citizen. But the kindness of his nature died out as soon as he saw a man in a different dress. So limited kindness is a different thing. Strangers are exploited in all countries because they do not know how to defend themselves. Thus they carry home false impressions of the people they have seen. Sailors, soldiers and traders, that is what they go to foreign countries often, in Swamiji's time at least. Behave in foreign lands in very queer ways, although they would not dream of doing so in their own country. Perhaps this is why the Chinese Swamiji is deliberately showing how the other side, that means English people are bound to criticize others, but how other people look at them, that Swamiji is showing. Perhaps this is why the Chinese call Europeans and Americans foreign devils. They could not have done this if they had made the good, the kindly sides of Western life. Therefore, the one point we ought to remember is that we should always try to see the duty of others through their own eyes and never judge the customs of other people by our own standard. I am not the standard of the universe. I have to accommodate myself to the world and not the world to me. So we see that environment changes the nature of our duties. This is what within India Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra meant. And doing the duty which is ours at any particular time is the best thing we can do in this world. Let us do that duty which is ours by birth. And when we have done that, let us do the duty which is ours by our position in life and in society. Birth means in the caste or whatever situation we are born in. And then we grow and we see. There is, however, one great danger in human nature, namely that man never examines himself. Introspection is a necessary thing. He thinks he is quite as fit to be on the throne as the king. Even if he is, he must first show that he has done the duty of his own position, and then higher duties will come to him. So here again, one should not covet the higher duties, but if you do your duty properly, higher duties also will come to you. When we begin to work earnestly in the world, nature gives us blows right and left, and soon enables us to find out our position. We may dream, but the nature gives us blows, and we have to find out our position. No man can long occupy satisfactorily a position for which he is not fit. Another important point, can long occupy. That means for some time he may be, but then he will be thrown out. There is no use in grumbling against nature's adjustment. He who does the lower work is not therefore a lower man. No man is to be judged by the mere nature of his duties, but all should be judged by the manner and the spirit in which they perform them. Everywhere. The idea or the attitude behind their duty, that is the main judgment of the character. Now, he brings another point, that this duty is an elementary thing. When the mind grows, when the mind becomes spiritual, the very idea of duty is taken to be bondage. Then what we do good to people, or whatever we do is for love of people, is for love of God. And as God lives in all, it is for the love of humanity which prompts me, no duty. And that is what Bhagavan tells in the Gita. Name parthasya kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana. Nana vaptame vaptavyam varte evacha karmani. In all the three worlds, there is nothing called my duty. Because I do not expect anything from anybody, so there is nothing called duty. I work because I love this world. So the motive power has changed here. Swami just talked of motives. So, on a higher place, but we have to begin in the beginning. So in the beginning we must see duty. And while doing duty, the mind will grow. And when the mind grows, he will start loving the humanity. That Swami has already described. And then the idea of duty will go away. We should never perpetuate the idea of duty. Give an example. A young man wants to become sannyasi. People come around him. You have a duty to your parents. He has outgrown that duty. His duty is towards God primarily. So, the idea of duty itself changes. That is the next topic Swamiji is saying. Later on we shall find that even this idea of duty undergoes change. Idea of duty. And that the greatest work is done only when there is no selfish motive to prompt it. Duty also is selfish. Yet it is work through the sense of duty that leads us to work without any idea of duty. When work will become worship, nay, something higher, then will work be done for its own sake. We shall find that the philosophy of duty, whether it be in the form of ethics or of love, is the same as in every other yoga. The object being the attenuating of the lower self so that the real higher self. We will take this para in the next class. In general, I am telling, some people ask me, by habit, I say tomorrow. But tomorrow is not tomorrow. Tomorrow means next class. So, this will be taken up in the Thursday class, please. We have heard about duty and the higher idea we have yet to hear in the study of Karma Yoga. So, we stop here today. Om Paratatve Sadalino Ramakrishna Samagyaya Yo Dharma Sthapana Rato Vire Shamtam Namamyaham. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamasti.